So this is another series of script, very simple script that can be an entry point to programming, scripting, coding in Unity. The scripts are for very basic game-like logic, such as collecting things and activating things. So, for example, the spheres are marked as collectible, so I can just hit them and it will disappear, and a counter will, increase. So I can with a little bit of coding, I can make things happen after, for example, I collected all of them, or can be some kind of like scoring point or some kind of very simple rudimentary goal. The other script here is a script that activates and or deactivates certain other objects. So if this is a kind of like a button, which is just a cylinder, and if I get close enough, if I hit it, it will turn on another separate object and turn off another one. So the cylinder that was there at the beginning disappears and a quad, which is say like a door, appears. Right now, if I hit the door, this is a scene change script. So if I hit the door, it will give me an error because the scene I'm pointing to is not loaded. But I'm going to talk about it in a second. So how do they work? The scripts, as you know, they are component that you can attach to certain objects, to all game objects. A game object can have as many components and as many scripts as you want. That doesn't mean that the scripts play well or play nicely with each other, obviously. But if you want to attach a script to an object, you can just either right click and drag and drop it. Drag and drop it to the object in question, or add a component and type the name, for example, like collector. So in this case, I already added a collector script to this object. So the collector script is just a script that you can sort of like double click on it. It's relatively simple. It checks it assumes that there are some objects that are tagged, and these objects are made collectible, and these objects are being destroyed when the players gets close to them. So the players needs to have a collider, which is should be part of the prefab that you have there, player. So if you just have that in the scene, you should have a collider. The script needs to be attached, so if you're starting from scratch, just attach it to it. And then there is one parameter that you want to have, which is the actual name of the collectibles. You can actually have different kinds of collectibles. So if you're starting from your own scene, that you can create an object or import an object, say that this is something that you imported from the internet or created yourself. Let's do a bunch of cubes, for example. So let's say that this is a collectible, and how do you make it so? Well, a collectible has to have two things. It has to have a collider that is marked as trigger, and it has to be tagged. So the tag is up here. In this case, I created a tag, but let's create another tag as well. Like say, let's assume that my collectibles, or that I don't have the spheres. I'm gonna just disable the spheres for a second. So let's assume that this is my, my key. You want to right click here, add a tag, and create a new tag. In this case, it can be whatever single string you want. In this case, I'm gonna call it key. Or like money or something. And then now the tag should be available here and you should be able to select it. Then next thing on the player, instead of collecting collectibles, you can collect a key. And the other thing you want to do is to make sure that the collider that should come with the object that you're creating, and if it doesn't, if you're importing an object from the internet, a mesh from the internet or something that you created, you want to just add a component, and you can do collider, and the collider can be of any shape and form. If it's a complex object, you might want to use the mesh collider. If you're just checking the distance, might make sense to look at the sphere, to attach a sphere collider. And I think by default, they should, right now it's not really visible, but by default, they should be about the size of the object, but you can change the parameters here, for example, the radius. So if you want this object to be activated or to be collected, even if you're not right into it, you can do so. You can also have both a normal collider and a trigger collider, but this is the most important thing, that you want to check the trigger box. So the trigger is just selecting, it's just marking this collider as not as something you're bouncing against, not something solid that activates the physics system, but rather something that just detects, allows you to detect when you're entering into it, and is essentially an active area. So when I reach the collider of this square, the square disappears because it's marked as collectible with this particular script here, collector. So if you go and open the script here, you will see it's just like 4 lines of code, and it's just meant to give you an example of a simple thing you can do just by checking the proximity or collision. What it does is basically find on trigger enter, detects a trigger, sort of like a trigger overlap, and you check if the tag of the other objects, in this case the cube that you just seen, matches with the one that is provided. So here there is a counter and an if condition. So in this case, it just produces a message on the console that's saying, okay, 3 spheres, but with a little bit of coding that you can also find online. You find examples. You can change scene, or you can activate an object and things like that. Make a sound or things like that. So that's one of the 2 scripts. The other script is the one that activates and deactivates things. You can do quite a lot of basic and not so basic logic in your scenario just by turning on and off objects. So each object can be activated and deactivated through the little check in the inspector here. So you can just turn it off. And when an object is off, it's not just invisible, but also the scripts and the behaviors that are happening here will not happen. It's essentially as if you were just deleting it. So it's pretty much the same as deleting it, except it's there. You are able to turn it on again. This is different from making them invisible. So here on the hierarchy, I can make this object invisible on the scene, but then when I hit play and I actually start to move around, that cylinder will be there still. So this is very important. That's a difference. And same thing, this object here prevents you from touching it. Essentially, it locks it out of the click interaction. Anyway, so this is making it invisible in the scene when you're editing, but not in the game. And this is making it not only invisible, but also like completely disable it. So that's what I'm using when I'm like in this activator script. The activator script, if you double click on it, has also like a few lines of code. I'm just checking if there are colliders attached to the objects, and printing a message just to help you figure out what's missing. And then it basically just does this. When you get into the active area, it checks if the other object is the player, and if so, activates an object if you specify how to activate an object. So how do you set it up? Let's set up a new completely different one. So if I were to start from scratch, I will, in this case, what I did was just creating an object here, in this case a cylinder, because I guess I was thinking of a button of some sort. This one comes with a capsule collider, which I can make a little bit bigger just to make sure that I'm hitting it. Yeah. You want to mark this as trigger. and you want to attach the script that is activator. So the script activator expects a player. You can drag and drop the player here, but if the player is just named player with a capital P, it should happen automatically. So you might or might not have to do this depending on your player's name. And then it expects one object you want to activate and if you want an object that you want to deactivate. So for example, this cube here, how do you associate that to that script? So there are two ways. One is to just drag and drop the cube to activate here from the inspector. You cannot drag and drop from here. But from the hierarchy to the inspector, you can do that. Or you can click on the little target button, and then you can select certain objects in the scene. So if you remember the name of the object, in this case it was, I guess, cube. So you can select cube. You can also click on it, and that will highlight the cube, and then you can click on the cube and it will highlight the cube. So it's actually quite important to give, you know, decent names to these things. So back to the sometimes it can be it will take a while for you to get used to this whole clicking on an object, it turns on the inspector, clicking on the other object turns the other on the other inspector. Sometimes you want to drag something, and instead of dragging, you're selecting the other object. So don't worry, you'll get used to that. So in this case, I have this object here that had an activation here, and I'm activating the cube. The current logic of this little script is that if you want to activate the cube, it means that it would be deactivated at the beginning. So even if like this cube, even if it's here in the scene active, as soon as you press play, it will disappear. So if you look around, you will not see that white cube. You will see it as soon as you hit the button or the active area. So I'm using the button as a kind of like a metaphor, but it can be pretty much anything you want. It can be an area that, you know, triggers a cutscene of some sort. It can be, you can have like particle effects attached to it, and that object is an explosion or some special effect. You can have a sound that is activated. You can also check this little checkbox here that is self-destruct, that makes essentially this activator collectible, and to some extent I imagine it as a way to implement a key door type of situation. So that's like the common mechanic thing. So like right now I have an object here, and if I touch the object, it opens the door and the object disappears. Like imagine I picked up a key, and now I can move and enter that door that takes me to another scene or teleports me to something else. Here I also have like the scripts for teleporting from point A to point B or teleporting to another scene. In this case, the door teleports you to the other scene, but as you will see, it produces that error I showed at the beginning. What does it mean? It just means that your scene, like the scene you're being teleported to, has to be loaded in the project. So if you go to build settings, you will see these are the scenes in the build. It's just this one here that is currently open, that is called scripts 2. So if you want to teleport, in this case the teleporting is to scene name scripts, you have to a bit awkwardly, you have to open the scripts, you save this one here, so that's the scene that we want to be teleported to, and then you go to build settings and you add the open scene. So if the scene is the second one, you will still start from the 0 if this the first one. So if you want this one to be the first scene, you have to drag it up here. If not, it will just start from this one. So when you hit play, you're starting from script 2, and now you have to have it open. And now the door should be functional. Should take me to the other example here. All right, that's more or less it.